Hey, what's up, everybody? This is your boy, the dope ass dude, and I am so excited to be back with y'all on tonight. Hope you guys can hear me good out there. Pat, I see you in the audience already. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Let me know if you can. But happy Monday, everybody. I'm so happy to be back on tonight. And tonight is going to be a great show. But you guys already know we got to get rid of the preliminary things, get those things out of the way. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, if you don't mind going ahead and subscribing to the YouTube channel. And while you're there, click on notification so that you can be notified every time a new podcast is uploaded to the site. And then if you're not able to catch the podcast on Monday nights, you can always catch it on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Again, that's Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. And then, you can always watch it live every Monday. You can watch it live on Facebook, X, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Again, that's Facebook, LinkedIn, X, and YouTube. You can catch it on those platforms. And then if you are not following me on Instagram and TikTok, if you don't mind, go ahead and follow me on all of those platforms, both Instagram and TikTok. I can be followed at the Dope Ass Dude Podcast. And then lastly, we'll go ahead and get Jamal's info out. You can follow Jamal on TikTok and Facebook, and both of those platforms, you can follow him at Jamal or George. So on Instagram and TikTok, you can follow him at Jamal or George. So I'm really excited to have Jamal on the podcast. I've known Jamal over 25 years, and I've had the opportunity to watch this guy evolve into this amazing man that he is today. He's a father, he's a husband, he's a believer, and he's definitely a hard worker, and he's super passionate about life. So I'm really, really excited about watching him on his journey and seeing how he constantly pivots in life. He's constantly doing something new and different. And after last week's podcast, he hit me up and he was like, hey, man, this is what I'm doing. And I think this would be a great idea for your podcast. So I had to have this guy on here because if he's calling and he's talking about something that lets me know instantly, he's super passionate about it. So let's go ahead and bring Jamal on out. Jamal, what's going on, man?
Hey, what's the word, man? What's going on?
Nothing much. How you doing?
Hey, man, I'm good. I'm real good.
You good? So how's the fam doing?
Man, they everywhere, busy, but it's good.
Yeah. So, and how's your youngest baby doing? He's like 1 now or 2?
Yeah, man, he 18 months, man. So he everywhere,
Wow.
man, talking and running everywhere. So yeah.
Wow. And your wife, she's doing good?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Jamal, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. For those, because this is your 3rd time on the podcast, but
Has
you've
it been
never
my third,
been.
really?
Yeah, remember you was on here with 3 other guys.
Oh, yeah.
And then you was on here with Kashif. It was just you and him. And now this is your first time on here by yourself. So the spotlight is on you, bro. So, so tell us about yourself, man. Tell us a little bit about you.
Just kind of piggyback what you said. I mean, dad, husband. I'm a social worker by trade. That's what I do. Originally from Dallas, grew up there, and now I live in Oklahoma. Been here since I went to college and fell in love with the city, and so now I'm an Oklahoman. So yeah.
So do you think you'll ever move back to Texas?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Man, y'all not the same no more. It's not the same. It's not the same Dallas and Texas that I'm used to from 2011, man.
So what done changed so bad? What has changed?
Y'all basically Californians now, man. I don't know what y'all ain't even the same no more,
man. Whatever, man. You just done got up there with them country folks in Oklahoma, and now you done betrayed us.
Y'all done got bougie, man. I'm just trying to stay out the way, man.
So Jamal, let's go ahead and dive on into it. So I know you are a social worker, exactly, for everybody, and including me. What is a social worker?
So a social worker is essentially like a family advocate. So someone who is able to, give you resources and different things to, essentially remove barriers that you may be going through in your life, whether that be financial, whether that be housing, whether that be um, certain classes, or whatever the case, to be able to stabilize the home that you're in. So
Yeah. So how did you know that was your calling in life? How did you, well, one of the callings in your life, how did you know this is the direction you're supposed to go into?
to be honest, it really wasn't my original calling. I feel like I really wanted to be a marriage and family therapist, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go this way and I'm gonna help these marriages out and all this stuff. And then I got married and I'm like, nah, I don't want to do that, because everybody's relationship is different and it's not a one trick pony. And then, as far as with the social work, I kind of stumbled upon it working with people who have drug addiction, and came from households that, um, that had drug addiction as well, being second generation of that. And so I was a counselor for that, for drug addiction, and then kind of got looped into the social work part of things, being able to help them um, as far as the ones I worked with, are obviously addicted and have gone homeless, and family has kind of vacated them, so they're kind of ridded of resources, so they're just kind of there. And so, just really, just like I said before, being an advocate for them and helping them get back on their feet and giving them things that they may have not, possibly had their whole life, as somebody to kind of root for them and be able to see them through that whole process, getting back on their feet.
Yeah, so let me ask you this here. So when someone, because you say you help drug addicts and so forth. So is there a lot of instances where people's family just like don't deal with them anymore?
Yeah, man. I would say the vast majority of them, to be honest, because I mean, you got families that have, you know, drained a lot of money and resources into that family member, and then, with addiction, I'm sure you've probably seen before, but it's a lifelong thing, and so when they keep going back to it, and then they put them back in rehab, and then they relapse again, and it's just, family members get to a point where they just kind of, they wipe their hands of it, and they're just like, this is just going to be what it's going to be, and I'm not saying that that's necessarily wrong, but I think it's just certain people's paths, and um, when it comes to addiction and things like that, I mean, it just takes a lot of support and it takes a lot of patience, because I mean they're not in control of their life and their and things at that point. So
So in your experience, what advice do you give to people who are, well, the family members, what advice do you give to family members who have other family members that are addicts?
I would just say to be able to have those tough conversations. I think that the reason um, a lot of those conversations may be combative is because somebody just doesn't wake up and they're a drug addict, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that have to happen and a lot of things have to essentially go wrong for them to go that route. So a lot of family members don't want to have that conversation, and maybe traumas that they were a part of, that they don't want to accept, and I think it's being patient, it's being, let's have honest conversation, and like, let's really get them the help that they, need, because it may look different for each person. So
Yeah. So so with people, because it's always hard to understand someone else's issue if you've never walked in those shoes. And I love how you say they have to be patient with it. And how is it when we look at people with addictions, if you've never been in, we think it's so easy to just say, oh, you need to let that go. You can get over that. You can get over that. And that can be frustrating when you're watching your loved one. It seems as though they are sabotaging their future and their life. So with that being said, so how can, or what advice do you give someone to not be so judgmental when it comes to people that are addicted, because it's natural, and it's not so much that we're trying to pass judgment, looking down on them. But like I said, if you never walked in those shoes, you don't understand the struggle of coming out. So what advice do you give?
You know, it's a phrase that I used when I first got into drug addiction counseling. Um, I just kind of like you, I don't have any experience with it, and I have no idea. But a lot of my first sessions were kind of like, like, man, just stop doing it, stop doing the dope. Like just making it as simple and plain as that. And I was wrong, and I had to be educated myself to understand it from their perspective. But yeah, the quote I used was, "Hey, I'm counseling you, but you're teaching me." Right? Like I'm a counselor, but I'm not a professional in drug use. I'm not a professional in the life that you're living. So we're gonna work together and collaboratively, because that's the only way. And so, yeah, just kind of understanding that I'm not a that I can't tell you how to feel. And obviously, if it was that easy, there would be no drug addiction, right? Because at some point, every drug addict, they don't want to be one, right? I'm just saying, like, at this, it's something that they have to have, that they feel like they have to function. So yeah, just being, just the patience that I just mentioned, and then the non-judgmental, that's a big one, because you know they have dealt with a lifetime of judgment, um, and shame, really. Shame is a big part of it as well. So
Nice. So what is one of the biggest lessons or greatest lessons you've learned from working with an addict
man,
about yourself? What is one thing you learned about you?
it taught me, I'll be honest, man, it taught me humility, man, because it taught me that no one is too far from being on the other side of the desk, right? um, Everyone's different, and everyone has different vices and things like that. But yeah, that I'm not any different from this person, right? We just so that addiction can happen to anybody, and a lot of people are dealing with addiction in isolation, and they're not telling anyone, and they're just being able to function with it. But they're not having that support. But yeah, that it can happen to anyone. Seriously.
Wow. So, okay. So I know before we get to what you're doing now, you've worked in different areas of social work. So outside of addicts and what you do right now, what are some other areas that you've targeted or that you've worked with people?
Okay. Yeah. So when it comes to like the drug addiction, I did that about like 3 or 4 years ago. What I'm doing now, I'm a social worker for a Native American tribe out here, a pretty big one. And so I work with Native families being able to um, work with their families, and essentially get their children back home. Like I work with DHS of the state of Oklahoma. And so yeah, my job is to get that child home and keep that child safe, and essentially repair what we can repair and try to get where we're going.
Now, when you say get them home, what does that mean?
Say that one more time.
When you say get them home, exactly what does that mean and
So I deal
entail?
with kids that have been taken by the state as far as their custody, meaning that there was an event that happened, whether that be, I mean, they can be different things. There can be like a DV in the home. There could be drugs in the home. There could be um, a lot of different things that could happen in the home that the state has deemed this an unsafe situation for the child. And so what the state does is they take them into custody, which is they put them in a foster home, which is just a temporary home until they can possibly go back home. And so I work with kids that are in that situation where they aren't in their current home.
So I've heard that once a kid they go into the system, it's kind of difficult to get them out of it. Is that true?
Um, yeah, I mean, it definitely. I will say the system definitely has its imperfections, and I mean, I really do think it depends on age. If I'm being honest, we typically see infants, children under 2, children under 3. Um, they, if they don't go back home, they're typically adopted a lot faster than a child who's like 13 or 14. Um, it's just kind of the reality of it, especially when you're, I mean, it's tough because when we see it with a lot of children that are like older in age, like teenagers, you got to think too, like being in the system, um, it's a trauma within itself, right? You were taken from your home and put in a home that you've never been before, with people that you've never seen before, and so it's a trauma within itself. So typically what we see is behavior changes, and they're acting out and different things like that. And so um, families sometimes are reluctant to have, a teenager who has acting out behaviors in the home. They'd rather, 2 or 3 year old where it's just like, they can kind of mold them into, whatever they want them to be. So
Wow. Wow. So, in like as a social worker, someone who goes into homes or, deal get kids back into their home, what type of emotional how does that impact you emotionally? And how do
um
you maintain your sanity? Because you
yeah,
have 3 boys you have to come home to, and you got to be good. You have to dust that off before you get home.
yeah.
So how does that impact you?
I really think it's, doing this for a while now. I've been doing this over 5 years now. Just being able to kind of compartmentalize things. I will say, some of my cases are really, they're really difficult as far as dealing with, and you get close with the kids, you get close with the parents, the families, and then when it, you want to, do a good job, you want to do good work, man, and sometimes it just doesn't end that way, and and it's but I think it's that balance of being able to compartmentalize and then being able to um, do self-care in a sense, working out and being able to do things that you enjoy to be able to kind of balance things, because this job, it can take you places mentally for sure. So being able to balance that.
Yeah. So Marion said, I work in mental health field, and sometimes we deal with patients, drug addictions, and I have learned that most times there is a lack of true knowledge, understanding, and patience of the disease. And I think that's what people have to realize. It's a disease. It's a disease. And we base our opinions and actions off stigmas and stereotypes. So educating families it's super important. What do you think about that?
No, I think it's vital, man. I think most families are kind of operating in misinformation, if I'm being honest. And so, um, kind of going back to that shame, um, I don't think when it comes to drug addiction that you can shame them into sobriety. You know, it has to be something where they feel supported and they feel, that they're able to fail, because, sometimes they will. And, you got to, help them get back up on the bike and let's try it again, and just going back to that patience thing. But no, the stigmas are, they've always been there. And I think they, unfortunately, they probably always will be, but we can always chip away by giving them that information and educating them. And I try to do that whenever I can, because just like when I told you I first got into the field, and they were, it's just kind of one of those, like, it's like, just stop doing it, stop doing the dope, stop doing this. Oh, it's affecting your kids, like, stop doing it, and it's like, if they could, they would. What I'm saying? Like, it takes more than that.
Yeah. So let me ask you this here. So you said earlier, some of the kids and they deal with trauma. What type of trauma do you find most common happening with kids that you're placing back into the home?
um what I typically deal with is a lot of DV, a lot of mom and dad fighting and that type of stuff, um, and obviously drugs. That's a big one. Parents doing drugs in front of the kids, and that type of stuff. But yeah, those are the two big ones that we run into. Insane neglect, but that kind of goes along with the drug use. But yeah, the kids just not being watched and things like that and cared for. So.
Okay. So mental health, and I think that's something that we hear a lot. We hear the word mental health. Everyone, we have mental health month. To you, what does mental health mean?
That's a good question. Um, Mental health to me, man, it means, I think it means safety and honesty, in a sense of we all go through different things mentally, and we all have different thoughts, and we all have different perspectives on things that how we navigate life. But when we don't have a space to be honest about those feelings, I feel like that's when, um, mental health really becomes negative and it ramps up, things like that. But yeah, um, and that kind of goes back to that trauma as well. I think we all have kind of experienced something to a degree of, trauma, whether that be mild or severe. We all have triggers, and so being able to acknowledge those things and be like, and be able to tell people, or friends, family, whatever the case, loved ones, that hey, I'm not okay. Hey, I haven't been feeling okay. I've just been kind of functioning throughout this life, but I'm not okay. And having those conversations, it builds that safety. It builds that strength back up to be able to, navigate those things. So yeah, I would say, yeah, safety and honesty.
So do you think the safe space and the safety is getting better as time goes on? And the reason I say that is because I think like with your generation, millennials and um Gen Zers and all of those, it seems as though, especially with the guys, the men, you guys have no issue articulating how you feel. Do you think a safe space is being felt more now with as time goes on, or do you think that is still like if a man is in a relationship, he doesn't feel safe with his wife or his girlfriend to share his true thoughts? Do you think they still struggle with that, or do you think it's getting better?
Um, I mean, I would say it's getting better. I would say it's minimal though, but it's getting better though. I mean, just even from my personal experience, being able to, I still have friends from high school that we hang out and different things like that, and to see that how willing they are to be transparent about their feelings, about their relationships they may be in, about just life in general. It's just very interesting, and it's really refreshing because these same friends that I had back in high school, we would never talk about those things. They were really taboo. And if you mentioned them, you were soft or you were, but now, them being able to discuss it. And I think over time, I think it will, the taboo will slightly go away and those type of things. Um, I just think men need to be able to discuss with other men that, hey, like I'm not 100%, right? I'm and that man needs to be able to reflect that by, by indulging and not being like, oh, well, man, you need to get, you need to figure it out or whatever the case may be. Because I feel like that's kind of how it was back when I was growing up, like high school, middle school, that type of stuff. It was kind of like, oh, figure it out type thing. Like you'll figure it out. But being able to have that community and having that, other people, listen to different things that you may be going through. Who knows? They may have went through it themselves and may be able to help you navigate it. So I mean, it's just having that conversation.
Yeah. So what are you doing different? Like, because you have three boys. So how are
Absolutely.
you training your boys to be able to express themselves without the fear of appearing or feeling weak?
Um, that I feel like you gotta. I mean, I feel like it's kind of like a boxing match, right? Like I feel like you kind of got to pick your punches, right? We're not going to take all of them, and I feel like it's one of those where, I feel like with toughness has to come knowledge, right? I feel like, if you're not okay, let's talk about why you're not okay, and let's talk about how I can help, right? Like let me lend a hand because I'd want somebody to lend a hand to me, right? So if you're not, I mean, we talk about mental health in a, obviously with their age in a very general sense, but I feel like my boys are able to, um, express when it's like, I don't feel okay, or I'm sad, or I'm mad, or just in these different emotions, and being able to label them. I feel like that's the biggest thing because I feel like when I was growing up, we never were able to put a label to it. We just didn't feel okay, right? or you were sad, but you didn't know why you were sad, and you just kind of would just truck along. So just being able to have those conversations and be like, it's okay that you're not 100%. Like, let's talk about it, and we can, maybe you need some time to yourself. Even the same thing, even um, in marriage, with my wife, we have those conversations all the time, because life wears on you and things like that, and I'm not okay or she not okay. We have those constant conversations where it's like, all right, well, what can I do for you? Or what can I do to make this easier? What can I, and just that support, man. You gotta have that.
So do you ever find yourself about to tell your boys to suck it up?
You know what? Absolutely. But I feel like that's those traumas from just situations that I possibly have had. And
Yeah.
and it's interesting, I'll do that. And then my wife will look at me and she'll just be like, for real? And I'm like, yeah. Let me go in there and apologize. That wasn't even, what I'm saying? That wasn't even them. That was me. So just being able have somebody, being able to have somebody to check you, like, hey, that wasn't so it's good.
Okay. So let me ask you this question, because of course I know your mom. So and you said those were some of the traumas that you had from growing up. So
Yeah.
but your mom was a single mom, and she was just, her intentions and desire and goal was to raise a strong man the best way she could, as a single mom. So how do you decipher between what is trauma and what is your parents' best intentions?
Um. Well, I feel like that's a tough one because it's like, I mean,
Yeah,
we have our experiences, right? So I'm saying, like, I do think when it came to my generation, I do think a lot of our parents did what they could, and that goes back to capacity and different things like that. So, but that I feel like that's you still can't negate the effect it may have had on a child. And
absolutely.
so I'm not saying that trauma is completely on the parent, right? I'm not saying that at all. But I think the trauma is just the response to whatever happened, right? So, I mean, I feel like that's a tough one because I mean, I in a lot of senses don't think that it's viewed negative on the parent. It's just kind of how the child responded to it or how they viewed it at the time or whatever. So
Yeah. And the only reason I ask that question is because, when we grow up and you hear conversations, people, they say, oh, well, I had a lot of trauma in my childhood. This could be a man or a woman. And they say, I had a lot of trauma in my childhood. And instantly we blame the parent. We do.
right.
We blame the parent because we're like, the parent is responsible for the upbringing, the emotional health of that kid and so forth. So we do blame the parent, but the reason I ask that also is because parents, they raise us based off of what they know,
Yeah.
what they know. And I think with your generation and like how Andrea checks you, you guys are breaking it with your kids.
Hmm.
You're breaking it. You're a little bit more understanding that maybe I could say it differently that doesn't damage him or make him feel a little bit less about himself. And I just, when I hear people say, yeah, well, I had a very traumatic childhood and everything, I always wonder what part of that was their parents thinking they're doing a good job. Because there are some parents that intentionally set out to hurt their kid,
Right. Hmm.
but most, they are just doing the best they can.
Right. And I mean, I agree with that. I mean, I feel like it sometimes, I know for me, like it kind of takes you longer to kind of realize that it's like, you know, they do the best they can and with what they were given. And then kind of like what you said, what they were taught themselves. Right. But so I want to give you a question, piggybacking off of that though. So when it comes to trauma though, do you feel like some use it as a crutch not to change?
Yeah, I do. I do think that some use trauma or the word trauma, because some people who say they have trauma, they don't have trauma. They just bad people, and they use that to negate or justify their actions. I do believe that. But trauma, okay, so wait a minute, just ask me one more time what the question is, because I want to make sure I get it right.
Okay. So, do you think that people use their traumas or events that they've gone through as a crutch to not change behavior?
Absolutely. Yeah, and we talked about this last week with Coach Janine. At some point in your life, when you become an adult, you can no longer blame your parents for how you are as a person.
I agree.
Now, let me just put this in here though. Is if you were molested or raped, we're not talking about those things because those things are out of your control. You're not responsible for that. But if it's different behaviors that you have, once you get grown, you can't blame your parents for that stuff no more. You have to put in the work yourself to become better for you. And those people that are um holding on and using trauma as a way to justify how their behaviors are, those are people who are just they're set where they are. They're not ready to make a change. They're not tired of themselves being in that situation, so they're continuously repeating it. But once you get older, like, you should want to break that trauma. You should want
Right.
to get rid of it. And whether that's with therapy,
Hmm.
books, whatever you got to do. Once you get tired of being tired, you're gonna
Hmm.
get up and do something.
Yeah.
What about
No,
you?
I
Do you
totally.
think people hide behind it?
I mean, I think it's definitely possible. I think they do it at times. I do think um, sometimes we undermine how powerful and strong traumas can be. Um, I do think that it can be debilitating to where you feel hopeless, and um, you talk to some people and you're like, oh, okay, um, like I talked to some be some time, and I'm like, we'll talk about marriage and relationships, things like that, and it's almost like they're living in their parents' like trauma, you know, like they have certain fears that they haven't even experienced themselves when it comes like relationships or marriage, and they're just like, oh, nah, I'll never do that, man. My parents couldn't get it right, so I'm not gonna, it's just like, kind of like you said, it's just like, but you're not them though. And, you at some point, you're gonna have to want to break that cycle, like, or are you just gonna keep repeating it?
Yeah, and that a lot of people. I don't know if it's all that they don't want to break the cycle. I think some people are afraid of the unknown because
Sure.
I think it's harder to stay in stuff than it is to get out of it, but it seems like it's harder to get out of it because you don't know what the future holds. You don't know what you're walking into when you're trying to change. But to stay in something that you're unhappy in, that's pretty miserable. You are
Hmm.
constantly every day repeating over and over again that same song from yesterday. The trauma, you're constantly repeating it. At some point you just have to be like, I'm done with this, and I'm gonna do whatever it takes. I'm gonna go through whatever it takes, isolation, um putting in the work to get out of this situation. So
And I think also too, kind of like when we were talking about earlier, like about when I deal with families and different things like that, where maybe the parent was use substances or you know um, just certain opportunities that they just didn't exercise, right? And then the child does the same thing, right? And it's just like, it's almost like they're setting their child up for the same thing, and it's just like, at some point, like, you saw what this yielded, you know your dad, or whatever the case may be, And so at some point, it's like, so we got to do something different. Even if it is the unknown, we already know that this probably isn't going to yield me a lot of results. So that unknown probably, I mean, it may be the one. So I don't know. It's interesting, just um, kind of how people's mind works when it comes to that. And I mean, and I think a part of that too also is kind of forgiving, your parents and forgiving your past self, for those different experiences you went through, the trauma and all that. So
Yeah, yeah. I think you, like you said, when you grow up in a home and you watch it and you see it, it becomes your normal. All of that becomes your normal, and every now and then we have to work on creating a new normal for our lives, something different than what we saw, something different than what we were raised in, and all that other kind of stuff. Because if you don't, yeah, it's going to end the same way that it did with your parents. So Laura asked a question: do you have young clients or older clients, and how do you deal with people who are autistic or have autism?
interesting enough, my first job out of college, I was a therapist to children with autism. So I did that for about 2.5 years. Very, very interesting work, I will say. And when you talk about patience, listen, you gotta have some strong patience to be able to deal with that population, and then just being able to um, see them through from A to Z. It's just, I mean, it's amazing to see kind of that progress.
So what are some of the signs, and I really, ask this, so what are some of the signs that you should look out for autism? Because back in the day, there was probably, when I was growing up, there were probably a lot of people who were autistic, but they would just say, "Oh, they hard head," or they not, they're
Yeah,
hard head, or they're
yeah, yeah,
hyper,
yeah.
or they just don't want to learn. That's we put
Yeah.
that off on that. So how can one identify? What are some signs that you can look out for someone who lives with autism?
Um, I mean, I feel like the signs are kind of varying, um, but I feel like, yeah, that's my little one. But yeah, I feel like the signs are varying, but obviously, I think it's how they maybe respond to conflict or how they respond to um, different things. I know what I don't want to say this. I don't I don't want to speak on like what all the different semantics, because I don't want to give
Right,
anybody wrong advice. But
right.
I know from what I've seen, we've had kids that that have been on the extreme part of things, where kind of like you said, like they become hard to deal with. So maybe the parent is strung out on drugs or whatever the case may be. So they just stop parenting them at all. You know, um, like have them in a baby pen, for days at a time. So and you know um, just because they have needs, right? They have they've been diagnosed autistic or whatever, but the parent they just don't have it to give them, and so just that patience and being able to be there for them. But yeah.
And with that, so how important is it for parents to be educated on autism? How important is that?
Oh, I think it's pivotal. There's a lot of different resources out there now. I know there's organizations like the one I worked with out of college, where they provide therapy to children with autism, and so and we were like a entity where we only worked with kids that were from military families. Um, I didn't even know that before I started working there, but there's a huge population of autistic children that come from military families, um, and I mean, there's a lot of science behind it. It could be, the stress and different things like that, of moving around and all that. But just working with them, and so you see a lot of them with certain skills that they're just kind of behind when it comes to other children, um, whether it be, walking, whether it be talking, being able to communicate. It's just even small stuff like I think I had he was like 10, and he, for some reason, like he had like something where he couldn't like tie his shoes. Like it would just frustrate him, and he would just stop. And it was kind of one of those working with like just small stuff like that, um, and just being able to communicate. And we worked with a lot of children that were nonverbal. So being able to kind of work those muscles and being able to kind of get them to eventually speak, whether it be small words or sentences. I mean, it's just a marathon, man. Just those skills that we kind of take for granted in children. So
Yeah, I am always amazed by parents when I see that their child have like autism or anything, any type of handicap or anything that, because I think that when we have kids, we pray that a kid is going to come out 10 fingers, 10 toes, full
every
body,
time.
nothing wrong every time. And then when you have a kid and something is different about them, I can only imagine how devastating or emotionally and mentally that impacts a parent to have a kid that, yeah, that deals with something that they didn't expect.
Right. And I think it's also too, they deal with that, um, maybe the guilt, feeling like it was their fault and different, and things they maybe could have done wrong or things that they, could have done different. It's just tough because it's like, um, there's just not really no rhyme or reason, it's just kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. So what do you currently do in social work now? What do you currently do?
So, like I said, I work with the Native American tribe out here, and so what I do is I essentially what they would call it's called a permanency worker, and so essentially, a kid coming to custody, I work with them, I work with the parents, and I work with the court, um, to be able to help the parent, get the child back home. So, working with the parent as far as getting them into classes, where the parenting classes, DV classes, helping them, get employment, helping them get a place of their own. Because you know what I realize too, a lot of these people, like when it comes to like different responsibilities that um, you or yourself that we do kind of for granted, like they don't have those things, like as far as being gainfully employed, having their own place, having transportation, all those different things. A lot of them, they don't have those. So being able to kind of remove those barriers.
Yeah. So, what are some of the negative viewpoints the community have of social workers? What are some negative things they think?
Man, I remember when I first started working, and it was, I told my friends what I did, and they were like, "Man, you take kids?" And I'm like, I'm like, "No, I do not." You know what I'm saying? But it's just kind of that negative connotation where, people think that that's all that we do. That all we do is we go in people's houses and we take kids, and that's can't be further from the truth.
Yeah. So you ain't going in just robbing kids out the house with no reason.
Mm-mm. My kid's bad enough. You think I'm about to take other people's kids?
Okay, so that's what people honestly think about social workers is that y'all just go in people's house and take kids.
That we take kids, man. And so like they think, um, I've even had people that I've had, cases with, and they'd be like, "Oh man, you just took my kid because y'all get a bonus for taking kids." And I'm
Do
just like,
do y'all get
uh,
bonuses?
brother, no, sir.
Okay, I'm just
I
making
mean, no, no,
sure.
no, 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 no. No, that I mean that would I mean at that point, I mean we looking at legal issue. I mean that's completely illegal. But yeah, I mean I think it's just kind of the misinformation. Our goal isn't to take the kid. Our goal is to keep the kid safe and make sure that you have what you need to be able to take care of them effectively. So, I mean, if they want to boil it down to sure we take kids, sure. but we want to get them back to you. We just want to get them back to you safely. So
Okay, so got a good question here. Do you find that the ratio of children versus the number of social workers causes children to even get neglected within the system?
really good question. I will. There are children that, I mean, especially doing this for years. I mean, you see children that kind of fall through the cracks, right? And I feel like that's the sad part, where it's just like, um, you just the parents, they just can't get it together, and so you're trying to figure out a plan B, a plan C, and those fall through, and it's just kind of one of those things, man, where it's just like, and I've even heard other social workers, they just have kids that they've been dealing with 6, 7 years, that if they could adopt them, they would, because the kid is just, these are great kids, man. They just were dealt a bad hand, with parents that don't care for them and things like that. So yeah, and even in Oklahoma alone, man. I mean, we just have so many kids that are in the system. Like we have so many kids, we don't even know, to like, we don't even have enough homes to even, like, put them in. So um and I think that's where, we come in as social workers, where we work with the families to be able to even possibly find other family members, that would be willing to, adopt or foster the kids and different things like that. I mean, I run into it all the time, where, we got a kid here, and we looked at his whole family, and we couldn't find anybody. Then we found a random uncle in Nebraska or something that didn't know anything about this, and they fall in love with the kid and they adopt them, and those are the stories that you live for, man. It's just like, now that kid got a second chance, and so those are
So,
the kind of the coolest stories.
so have you ever removed a child from home?
I myself, I have not.
Okay. Okay. So when you guys remove, let's talk about that a little bit. So what are the steps? So when you remove a child from home, you first try to find a family member that can take in a kid, or what happens when a child is removed?
So the kind of the process, it's really, um, it kind of goes really fast, because obviously, everything is like referral based, essentially, right? So Oklahoma, we have like we have multiple call centers, and so let me just give you a scenario. So let's say, um, I'm your neighbor, and I've been noticing that you're, um, there's been, a I've been seeing your kid, possibly at home by itself. And um, I know that you're doing drugs, or you know different things like that. So you can call into the call center, and so the call center will call into the state, and then what we call CPS will come out, and they will come out and just kind of survey the situation, right? Um, when they survey the situation, they can kind of do one or two things. They can, either give you, kind of 30 days to kind of fix whatever the issue is, if they feel like it's something that's salvageable within 30 days, or they can remove the kid because the situation is just that severe. And so once that happens, yes, they look for family members. They they see if any of them can take them. If they can't, then they would have to put them in a foster home, which is any home that's available, within the foster care network. And so, that's kind of when things start.
Wow. Wow, yeah, my sister works for CPS. She works for CPS, and part of her job is she will remove a child
Yeah.
from a home. She
Hmm.
removes a child from home. And that, I know, for her, it's always hard on her, because she's a mom, so
Hmm.
she gets the challenges that comes with being, removing a kid. So, okay. Wow. So they will reach out to family members to see if a family member can take the kid in.
Absolutely, because you got to think about that. That's much easier for them than, find a foster home, which we, really have. There, we don't have a lot of them, so it's kind of like, if you have a family member or uncle, that can take them, or an aunt or a cousin, we would much more prefer that. So,
Yeah. Okay. So Darnell says, what's the difference between your line of work and CPS?
so I'm the next step after CPS. So I'm what they call permanency. So CPS, kind of like we said, they're the entity that removes children and kind of gets things started as far as the case. So I'm permanency, so I'd be the next step. So once it becomes a full blown case and they go to court and do all those type of things, then they're assigned to me. And so once they're assigned to me, that's when the parent the parent they start working a plan, which is called an ISP. An ISP is essentially a plan to get your kid back in the home with you. So these are barriers that you need to remove and work on for that kid to be safe in your home. And so that's what they're working on with me and DHS. So we're kind of tag teaming and making sure they have what they need. So yeah.
Nice, nice. So what is one thing that, okay, so let's see here. But some cases home need a visit for whatever reason because of unfit parents. Yeah. Yeah. So what is one thing you want to tell people about social work that you think that we need to know?
Um, I mean, I would say, that um, we care about these families and we really do want to be able to kind of bridge that gap. Um, and, we want to help. I think it kind of goes on deaf ears thinking that, we get some type of joy or anything about breaking up families. We really don't. We care about that kid and we want them to be able to thrive. And so, unfortunately, if we're moving that from the home, that's a home where they're not being cared for and not given the things that they need, then that is, something necessary that we have to do at the time. But yeah, I mean that social workers were needed, man, in a lot of different entities. There's school social work, there's hospital social work, um, different things like that, man. And I think, if people were a little bit more receptive to it, I think it can definitely make a difference in a lot of situations. So
Hmm. I think this person, you may have taken a kid out their house because they own you tonight.
wasn't me.
Have you made a recommendation on a case for the child not to be returned home?
Yes, I have. Um, I mean, like I said, man, the goal is safety, man. I mean, yeah, we want to return them back to home. That's our first goal. But right after that, if the parents, if they don't want to get right, man, we gotta look at a different avenue, different path. So, but yeah, I have
Okay.
I have recommended that a handful of times, absolutely.
Okay. So we got another question here for you. The questions rolling in for you, Jamal. I think they don't trust the way you look. So how do you handle false allegations? Like, so yeah, how do you handle false allegations?
So the first thing I tell my parents when I'm dealing with them, and I was like, hey, I cannot help you if you are not completely honest with me. You know, I deal with the court system. I deal with the state. So, you know, they're an imperfect situation, and they don't always get it right. So for me, if I'm advocating for you, I don't want to look like a fool if you're not being honest with me. So, um, you advocate and implore, those parents to be as honest as with them as you can, and so you handle it. I mean, you're dealing with another adult, right? So I mean, if they don't want to tell you, then you're just not going to know. So I mean, you just do it as best you can, and you just put your head down and you give them what they can and work. So I mean, if it's not true, then I mean, you kind of deal with that when it happens. But
Yeah. So Laura is she's a nurse down in Houston, and she said a lot of changes, even in a hospital setting. Anyone can report neglect,
yeah,
abuse, or get social worker involved. Yeah.
yeah, and
Wow.
I think that's the part that kind of scares a lot of people too, because I know with Oklahoma, um, we're a state where if you see child abuse, if you see anything of that nature, you're required to call. You know, not all states are required to do that, but Oklahoma is one of those states. And so, as you can imagine, if that's the requirement, there's a lot of child abuse calls that we get, and some aren't child abuse, but that person may have perceived it as that way, and so a lot of those get screened out and different things like that. But I mean, it just makes for a lot of legwork for social workers and the state itself.
So what is considered abuse? Because what you just said, someone, if they deem it's abuse, they can report it, but to you, it just may be regular discipline of your kid. So
Correct.
what is abuse?
Abuse is I would say it's any, um, I guess, behavior that's used in excess, I would say. Right. So, I mean, I think when it comes to, um, like cultural things, right? Um, there's some, in minority households that, they believe in whoopings, right? Um, and as a mode of correction or punishment or the things, whatever that may be. But, um, having multiple lashes of, purple and blue and thin cuts on the back of your back, that isn't just a whooping, right? I mean, that's a call, right? So I think it's kind of that fine line of a parent taking it too far. Yeah, I would probably say it's just that kind of that access and just that next step where now that child is in danger, type of thing, and the situation isn't controlled. So
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's a thin line, man. That is a
yeah,
very, very thin line because again, depending on how you choose to raise your kid,
absolutely.
all of that hitting your kid in the back and the chest and all this other kind of stuff, I don't agree with that. But the funny thing about it is now you see those type of things on TikTok where parents are disciplining their kids and people liking the video, and it's like, well, that's a thin line because the world, I don't
Yeah,
know, it's
and
crazy.
and it's tough because in a certain instance, right? Like obviously now we have social media and it's booming and different things like that. But like back when it was middle school and elementary and different things like that. I mean, like we look back, it's like would that be child abuse? Or would it like teeter that line? Because I mean, you know, now we get a lot of calls from we get a lot of our calls are from teachers. You know, um, teachers calling in because a student came in with bruises or a student came in with whatever the case may be, and they're concerned. And so now we have to explore and do all these different things, and so it's just, I mean, I don't know, man, it gets crazy.
Yeah. So, got another question for you. If a child has to be placed in foster care, how are the parents screened? Because some children are abused in foster care.
In a general sense, yes. I haven't come across it, but yeah, I have heard stories within the office of us having to close a foster home because that foster mom was abusing her power and doing different things that she wasn't supposed to do, or foster dad or whatever the case may be. But yeah, I mean, foster care. I mean, that's another one. It's imperfect as well. There's a lot of stuff that happens that um, with the system being so broad, it just kind of you miss it, you know. And so, unfortunately, sometimes that happens, and those kids are affected, man. And sometimes it's severe, man, because you got to realize too, they were taken from the home and put into a home where they do not know, and then these parents are putting hands on me, and I do not know them. So you can only imagine the trauma that creates. So
Yeah. Wow. Wow. So, Jamal, I mean, we're at the end of our hour, man. This has been real good. Well, I'm going to ask Dornell, do he have any more questions for you? Because tonight the audience is not trusting you, Jamal, for whatever reason. I don't know what
comes
it
with the
is.
territory.
Oh, wait, we got another question for you. Do you know how the foster care parents are screened? Some do it for the money. Yes, some people are making a lot of money with foster care, foster homes. Do you know how they screened?
I don't know. The process I do know is quite thorough. I will say. They are interviewing a lot of people that you come in contact with. They interviewing everybody in the home, family members. I know that's how they do it up here. I mean, they're really thorough. There are people that just that get declined to be foster homes. So, but yes, there is some families that have made it a monetary situation for themselves, and they don't work. They're just full-time foster parents. So yeah.
Wow. Okay. So Darnell came back and said, laughing out loud, nah, man, I'm good. Great conversation. And thanks for the work you do, Jamal. That's pretty dope. That's pretty dope. Well, he had a
Appreciate you.
good teacher. Me. He had a good teacher. I probably would be in jail today, Jamal. I would probably be in jail.
Listen, that line is so slim, man. A lot of us, man. A lot of us, man.
Yeah. So everybody, thank y'all for tuning in tonight. Go out, follow Jamal on TikTok and Instagram. I mean, TikTok and Facebook. On both platforms, he's Jamal or George. Go out and follow him. And if you have any questions, because you can see Jamal is extremely passionate about educating people on social work and different things that tools you may never even think or thought about. So reach out to him. You can DM him, ask him whatever questions you may have. And we will see you guys next Monday night at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Jamal, thank you for coming on, brother.
Absolutely. Appreciate you, bro.
All right, then, everybody. Good night. Peace. Dude, that was